So there is our miniature nicely highlighted with a dry brush. Hopefully you'll agree that looks rather nice. As long as you sort of use the dry brushing technique properly, you can really get some nice effects. It really isn't something that, I know a lot of people kind of sort of maybe look at it as a bit of a easy sort of way of going through things, but if you do it right, it can look rather good. Now what we're going to do now, as a little bit of a tip, is now we've got all this done, we're going to sort of do all our brush painting now. And you know, if you ever make mistakes, you've got to sort of go back and get out your McCrag blue and start painting it, and maybe even dry brushing again. So a little tip is, what I'm going to do is I like to seal my work in with a gloss coat. It's basically like saving your work, and I like to use the intermediate Gauzy agent, which is a shine enhancer, and that's by AK Interactive. It is probably, I think it's one of the best gloss products you can use out there. Goes straight into the colour cup. It dries really quickly. It has got that nice shine enhancer, and the whole point is once your miniature's nicely protected with a gloss coat, if you ever make a mistake, you can nicely come along with, say, a cotton wool bud, maybe just lick it, maybe sort of make it a bit moist or dip it in water, whatever you prefer, and you can just rub at wherever the mistake is and it'll wipe it up, and because the gloss coat's there, you'll only wipe up the mistake and not all this work that we've already done. So I'm just gonna spray two light misty coats on here just to seal that in. I've already sort of shown you spraying, so I'll just do that off camera. So we're all nicely sealed in with a gloss coat, and you might already notice how that those highlights through the dry brushing has sort of been knocked back already by just putting a gloss coat on, which is what I mean. You know, do your dry brushing, then highlight a little bit more than you would, because this gloss coat's going to knock it back a bit. So now we're going to come to some normal some brush painting. And now when it comes to brush painting, I highly recommend going off and getting the Series 7 Winsor & Newton paintbrushes. These paintbrushes, I know they're a bit expensive, but they are so worth the money. You will sort of notice how your painting gets a bit better, and it just makes things a lot easier, and it's just all around a really damn good paintbrush. So what we're going to do now is let's just paint on some little bits. We've got our Retributor armor here, because we're going to be doing sort of our gold trim around the pauldrons and the Aquila in the middle. Always give your paints a good shake. Right, and what you want to do is try and sort of mix in a little bit of our colour just on a palette just here. Right, and then I always keep like two pots of water to one side. One I use for sort of cleaning off my brushes, and the other one I use for actually getting the water from it and using that to thin my paints. It's always good to thin pretty much all your paints. It might mean you might have to do 2 or 3 sort of thin coats, but it stops the whole brushstroke effect, because you can paint on our miniature now, and if the paint's too thick, it's just going to leave behind some brushstrokes. And actually that's a bit maybe too thin, because it's really sort of spreading out, maybe a bit too much on my paintbrush as well. Right, and we're just now going to sort of nicely paint this on here, and as you can see, I mean, we're not getting good coverage, but it's a nice thin mixture. Right, so we know that we're not going to have clumps drying up, leaving all sorts of you know, all sorts of brush strokes and everything. Right, and as I say, if you ever make a mistake, which, you know, I feel like I've made a little bit of a mistake because we put that gloss coat down, right, we can rub at this paint. If I just bite it, and maybe even sort of with your teeth to sort of pinch, to sort of make it a little bit on the pointy side, so you can sort of get into all sorts of areas and stuff and gaps, whatnot. And if you need to, you can sort of clean it up without sort of damaging or removing any of that blue paint that we've put down. Right, so I can like sort of continue now, just brushing away at this. Right, and basically we just want to go all around all the gold bits or the Retarder armor bits. Right, and then we'll probably have to come back, right, and probably put a second coat on, and it should have enough coverage to continue. So there's our Retarder armor all nicely just on there. Just to kind of show you, using the same sort of technique of just brushing this on, I've used corn red just here. I have used what is this, Ushabati bone or whatever it's called, however you pronounce it, also just on here. And I've also used our Abaddon black just for his pistol, just over there. And also I've painted in our bolt rifle also, using the same techniques. Just thin your paints and just make sure you put about maybe 2, maybe 3 coats just on there. Now what I want to show you is doing our eye lenses just here. I'm going to be using our Wild Rider red to paint this in, but I'm not going to thin it down with water. I'm going to thin it down with something else, because what we're going to do, I'm coming in with a 00 paintbrush by Winsor & Newton. Now we can get some of this out, right, which that seems to have been clogging up a bit, but still we can use some of it. Right, put a bit of this onto our palette just like so, and then what I'm going to get out is a different product just here. I'm going to be using a fluid retarder, and this is also by Winsor & Newton, but really a retarder that is acrylic based, right? And I'm just going to plop some of this onto our palette just here, just in the corner, and then I'm going to start mixing this in with our Wild Rider red. Now the whole reason for the retarder is, one, we need to thin this anyway. Remember, always thin your paints, but being a retarder, it slows the drying time of the paint down. And when it comes to eyes, if you've ever tried to do it before, because you're here with your paintbrush and you're very carefully trying to get this eye lens right, you're spending quite a bit of time just trying to make sure you get it just right, and what potentially happens is, before you know it, the tip of your brush has dried, right? Because really you're really just using the absolute tip of the brush, and it will probably dry rather quickly. But with the fluid retarder, you can spend a lot of time just really trying to make sure you're about to get it, and just use the tip of the brush, right, and it should stay dry. Because plenty of times I've come along and I'm just about to sort of paint right where I want it to be on the eyes, and you touch the eyes or something and nothing happens because the tip of your brush has all dried up. So really cool to get that fluid retarder in there, and that's the first stage for our eyes. Next up, I want to do some more dry brushing, but really it's basically the same as before. Now when it comes to dry brushing, you don't have to use the actual dry brushing paints. You can so easily come along. I've got lead belcher here, which isn't the dry form, it's a base, and we can simply get a bit of that on the end of our dry brush and then just start brushing onto like a kitchen paper towel, until you start to see it in a very it's starting to fade and look quite weak. And when it comes to our bolt gun, again the same as what I've shown you before. You basically want to actually just sort of find the right points to start brushing across, not flicking it to and fro, just sort of start brushing it across, right, and just get in those edges. So we've got all those edges nicely highlighted up, and we've got that sort of nice metallic sort of scratchy look to it. I do, because this is like tactical painting, I'm not going to sort of do different colours for covers and stuff because it's time and we want to do this tactically, but just to sort of liven it up a bit, I personally like to just come along with the lead belcher and maybe sort of just paint in a few detail bits just to liven it up. Just that little bit, maybe a few things on our scope here and there. Right, I like to do our sight this end also, and it just kind of gives it a little bit more life.